Hello to everyone in Rome. I apologize I couldn't be there. My name is Darren Aitchison. I'm a professor at Triton College of Behavioral Sciences. I'm also a doctoral student at National Louis University in Chicago, Illinois. I'm in the DEE, the Disability and Equity in Education program, which is a subspecialization of special education. I'm also the Director of Research and Development for the IMPACT program. And I'm glad to be here today. I hope you enjoy my webinar of one. The science of human behavior. The science of human behavior is like, think about it like a house. And that house is built on the ground of functional contextualism. So functional contextualism is the idea, the belief, and the proof that different things mean different things in different contexts. So in one context, this chair I'm sitting on, think of if I'm at a restaurant, I'm sitting in the chair in order to eat my dinner. But in the same context, I could use a similar chair, similar make and model, to stand on top of it to get something off the shelf. Same thing, but different meanings in different contexts. So on the ground floor of science of the human behavior, we have applied behavior analysis, which centers around differential reinforcement and functional reinforcers. Our second floor is relational frame theory, and our third floor is acceptance and commitment therapy. We'll talk more about those a little bit later. I'm really excited to talk about the research areas between applied behavior analysis and restorative justice and for collaboration. Research area number one is using behavioral skills training and performance feedback to train people in restorative justice. Number two is using human performance technology and behavioral engineering principles to help restorative justice practitioners overcome barriers encountered in society. The third, which we'll talk about in the second talk later in this conference, is the use of RFT and ACT to improve outcomes of mediations between victims and the offenders. This is a really, really young science. It's only been around since the 1990s with Howard Zieren's influential book, Changing Lenses. And ABA is still considered a young science, and it's a little over 100 years old. So restorative justice is even younger. Right now, there's not a clear consensus on what is and is not exactly a restorative practice. Unlike in behavior analysis, where we have the 7 dimensions of behavior analysis, we don't have something like that in restorative justice. This creates huge problems in empirical research. Because how do I measure something? How do I study something? How do I present outcomes of something that's not clearly defined? However, there are some things that widespread agreement on experts around the world. So we're going to talk about the agreement first. The following interventions, when they're done with integrity and fidelity, are recognized by most people around the world as restorative practices. Those are peace circles, victim offender mediation, that's the camp that I come from, conferencing, victim assistance, ex-offender assistance, restitution, and community service. And there's some newer additions that I also include: crisis negotiation and resolution, or CRI-RES, and critical incident stress management, or CISM. This has 3 guiding principles: that justice should work to restore the harm. The people most directly involved in the incident should be allowed to participate, and we're to build and maintain a just peace. This is substantially different from the punitive measures that we see typically in schools and criminal justice systems around the world. Restorative justice practitioners, we have 4 near universal value statements. The first is encounter, which means everybody should be able to participate. Amends, we should seek to repair the harm. We want to reintegrate those people who've offended society. We want to include those people to participate in the resolution of the problem. Now, are all these things truly measurable? Not necessarily, and that's part of the problem. Not a clear definition of what is and is not restorative justice. I always write my own definition and include it in all the research articles before I submit them. So this is my own definition of restorative justice. I agree with everything you saw on those previous 2 slides, the guiding principles and the foundation concepts. But I also learned a little bit more from my mentor, Dr. Ron Clausen, at the Center for Peacemaking and Conflict Resolution in Fresno Pacific University. We want to answer 2 crucial questions. Number 1, how is power used? Number 2, who benefits from the application of that power and why? These answers drive my research questions, but also my intervention as well. The principle of lawful determinism in ABA still applies. The universe is still a lawful and orderly place. People do things for a reason. We just have to figure out what that reason is and what to do about it to create our intervention. And Dr. Clausen has a famous saying. He says that trust grows when agreements are made and kept. And I've seen this over and over and over with my work with victim offender mediations across the country and with my partners across the world. I'm a doctoral student in the Disability and Equity and Education program. So I'm an education practitioner. So design-based research is an education-based research. And to make it a lot of gobbledygook comprehensible, basically we just keep refining our intervention. So we do one little mini experiment, we evaluate that, we make some changes, we change another variable, we redesign, we do another iteration, we call it, we do another mini experiment, and we do several mini experiments till we get one big grand resolution. See today is something that I don't know if anyone else has ever done before. I call it design-based research with verification. So we're doing design-based research. We're doing those iterations, one little mini experiment after another to refine our intervention, our independent variable. But at each one of those steps, we're using human performance technology as a functional assessment procedure. And we're using single subject research, single subject design as an evaluation step. Typically statistics or something even more loosey-goosey is used. So like I said, we believe we're the first people to do this. We call this our design-based research evolution document. So this is how our intervention evolved over time. The spiral network there is designed to show that we move in progress through iterations. So we start with performance feedback and VORP. We'll tell you more what that is later. We'll start with pedagogical questions. Our overall grand questions, what do we want to answer in our project? Then we go to iteration 1, which is performance feedback and victim offender mediation. Then we go to iteration 2, which was behavioral skills training, mini DTR and VORP. And then we proceed into these other interventions, and I'll tell you more about those as we go along. But the idea, again, is that we refine our intervention as we go along. We get a little bit closer and closer to what we want with each little mini experiment. This is our project overview as of the 10th of November of 2019. These are our research questions on our pedagogical goals, beginning with phase 1. So we want to know, will teachers improve their positive interactions with their students if they're trained to integrity and fidelity and restorative practices? Then will teachers and other school officials improve the implementation of school-based restorative practices if they are trained in a gradual and stepwise fashion? And then we also wanted to know, will restorative practices in the classroom help with academic instruction as well? Reference for iteration 1, it appeared in the September of 2018 issue of the Internet Journal of Restorative Justice. So we had 3 participants for this study. One student was white, one was black, and one was Hispanic. And we used performance feedback to train teachers in victim offender reconciliation, which is a form of victim offender mediation. So our dependent measure was the number of discipline referrals per month that resulted in a classroom removal. For experimental design, we again use that design-based research with single subject verification. This time we use a multiple baseline across participants. Result of our intervention here. Again, this is a delayed multiple baseline across participants. So we started with student number 1. Everything to the left of that staggered solid line is the baseline before we intervened. So you can see student number 1 was between 10 and 15 referrals per month. He was getting kicked out of class 15 times per month. After we implemented the victim offender mediation and the restorative justice in the classroom, he had 2 the remainder of the year. Student number 2 was between 10 and 20 times getting kicked out of class per month. We got him down to 0 to 1. Third one there was between 10 and 15, also down to 0 to 1. So because we had the same behavior change across those 3, we replicated that. We consider that a functional relationship, which is a demonstration that our intervention was likely to be the result of the behavior change. One quick thing to note here. People often look at this and they go, wow, you really changed the student's behavior. But we really didn't. We changed the teacher behavior. We taught the teachers a better way, a more humane way to do things in the classroom. We're at the end of our iteration here, our first little mini experiment. So we ask ourselves, what did we learn? We learned that VORP and the performance feedback, at least for these 3 students, was much more effective and far less costly, both in work hours and actual spending, than the punitive system the school district had in place. We also changed the adult approach as opposed to the children's behavior. We go on now to iteration 2, our second mini experiment. This is the reference for that. It's currently under peer review. So it may be published by the time this goes to the conference, where it may not be. So in this phase of the study, we had 2 first-year female educators. Both of them were Caucasian. Our independent variables were performance feedback, the behavioral engineering model, victim-offender reconciliation, and discipline that restores, used in a minimal way. Our dependent measure was the number of 15-second time increments where the positive behaviors occurred, and they were recorded every 5 minutes and graphed accordingly. Our experimental design here was, again, single subject design. This is a changing criterion design. This is our behavioral engineering model, our functional analysis, if you will, of the building organization. For those of you familiar with the HBT, Gilbert's behavioral engineering model is very famous. It's one of those long-standing and established of all the interventions that they have. And we're just starting now to use it in schools. These are the results. These are the results of our second phase of our experiment. So again, we demonstrate a functional relationship because when we challenge them to meet, when we reinforce them to get to a higher number of positive interactions per time interval, they met those criteria. There's a stronger case for teacher A, the top row, than teacher B, the bottom row. But nonetheless, we do have evidence that our training these teachers in restorative justice was responsible for the change in the number of positive interactions they had per time interval with the students. This is some of the academic data from these classrooms. So the majority of these students had a tremendous measure of growth that they had never had before. So we don't have enough evidence to show that restorative justice alone was responsible for that better academic achievement. But at least we can say at this point that it didn't slow down the academics. And that's something that a lot of teachers tell me here in the States, that they don't have time to do social emotional teaching. They don't have time to do social emotional learning. It takes away from academics. But this clearly shows that that's not the case. So again, this documentation, this information is only corollary at this time. And correlation does not always mean causation, but it is very promising. We're very excited about this. Our lessons learned from phase 2. The partial implementation of DTR was very effective in these 2 classrooms. Again, we showed a change in positive interactions over time. And all the populations told us that they felt much less stress when they used the DTR, the restorative justice system, than the standard punitive discipline policy. This is something that I hear all the time in my research across the states and across the world. That people feel much less stressful. Things are much more peaceful when they're using restorative justice.